So I had a runner come to me recently who has a lot of experience racing, but she's been struggling over the last few years to just really have that breakthrough that she's looking for, has hit a plateau that many of us are used to seeing at some point in time. And so when I looked at her training, her last training logs and what she'd been doing over the last several years, there were some things that I noticed that are definitely common themes among runners in her same situation. So I basically told her these are the 3 big things that we are going to work on, and that's what I'm going to share in this video with you guys. And if you guys can employ these strategies into your next training cycle, I think you are going to be absolutely amazed at what happens next. So the first big change is that you are going to run 80 to 90% of your miles at an easy pace. So this is not intuitive for us as humans, as runners. From a young age, we are really taught this go big or go home kind of thought process. Perhaps you had to run the mile in track and go as fast as you possibly could. And that's just really been ingrained in us from competitive sports. I know it is for me. Same thing if you go to some sort of a gym, go to a class like Orange Theory, then the point is to leave there feeling like you had an amazing workout, you're super, super sweaty. And that's what you think you should be doing all the time. So it's really hard for people to make this transition when they are training for something like an endurance event like the 5K up to the marathon, and they are supposed to be training in a different way than just going all out on every single run that they're doing. So for distance runners, it's been proven over and over again, actually not just for distance runners, but anyone in any sort of distance event like swimming, cycling, that a majority of easy paced exercise is the best way to go. So since we are talking about running, that would be 80 to 90% in the aerobic easy zone with that 10 to 20% in that hard effort zone. So if you're thinking, no, to get faster, I have to run faster. That is true. You do have to run faster paces, but it's actually in really small doses, like a much, much smaller amount than you would imagine. According to the author of 80-20 Running, a book I highly, highly recommend, especially if you leave this not believing me, I think you will be a believer if you read his book, but by Matt Fitzgerald, and he said this: doing 3 high-intensity workouts per week was not only less beneficial than doing just one, it was worse than doing none at all. So when you think of it from that perspective, he's actually saying that 100% easy running is better than doing like 50% hard, 50% easy. And there's a lot in that book that talks about studies they've done of people who've done 80-20 versus 50-50. And you cannot ignore the facts in there. The people who are doing that 80-20, around that 90-10, something like that, they are the ones having the most success over and over and over again. They are also the ones that are able to add on more mileage, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So if you are having an aha moment right now, I feel you guys. This was me for a very, very long time. And when I was having those major plateaus in my running, I started seeking out the research to see what could I be doing differently. And this was the same theme that was coming over and over and over again from the experts. And it took me hearing it many times to actually believe it. And once I finally did, that's when I started making major gains in my running, taking over an hour off my marathon time, getting that sub 4 for the very first time, which I share in this video if you want to check it out. So I promise you guys that this is the right way to train. And if you just take the opportunity in your next training cycle to do it, you will be absolutely floored at what happens in your next race. So part 2 of this is to run more mileage. So something that I often see when runners come to me to work with me is that they think that they're running enough miles, or perhaps they don't. They know that this is something that they need, and it's one of the first things we talk about. All right, we're gonna get you to more mileage in this training cycle, but we also have to do it in a safe way. We can't just go from like 20 miles a week to 80 miles a week. That's not safe. So we are going to start building gradually from training cycle to training cycle. So I'm not saying, you guys, that you need to suddenly be doing what the elites are doing, or even the sub-elites, running 70, 80 plus miles a week. You can simply start by running more than what you are running now. And if you're thinking, no, I can't run higher mileage, I'll get hurt. Go back to the very first thing I said. Very likely you are running way too many of your miles at a fast pace or even a moderate pace, because if you're doing that, yes, you are going to get hurt. Or if you're not employing strength training, you are going to get hurt. So absolutely, most people can run a significantly more mileage than what they're running now if they employ some of those other practices that are keeping them a strong runner. But that's a whole other video that I won't get into. Just the bottom line is that if you want to get faster in your running, a big way to do that is by running more mileage. Even just the other day, guys, on my half marathon race, I could absolutely feel it in my legs. You can feel it at the end. When other runners are struggling, you're still feeling strong at the end of that race. That comes down to running more mileage in your training week after week after week. So ultimately, guys, there is a big difference in running the bare minimum necessary to get through a race versus doing the right amount of mileage to have a really successful race. So here's an example. Can you run your long run of 10 miles and get through a half marathon? Absolutely. I see it all the time. That is a way that many half marathoners train, and that's totally fine. If you just want to do the distance, that's okay. If you want to get faster, if you want to reach your potential, then you need to be extending those long runs up to maybe 14 to 16 miles. So are you going to do better than if you were running your longest run at 10 miles? That's not the only thing, but yes, very, very likely, yes, you will have a much better experience and a better race time. And part 3 of this is nailing down your fueling strategy. So what I see a lot of the times is that people are really just focused on the running aspect. They don't think about anything else outside of the running that could be affecting their running, and definitely is. So fueling is a big part of this, and making sure that you're fueling every run properly. And one of the things that I see the most in working with runners is this extreme fatigue that they start to get. So when you are building mileage up higher than you ever have before, your fueling becomes even more important. Otherwise, you're just going to get this extreme fatigue that you really can't shake. And yes, this can come down to building up your miles way too quickly. It can also come down to running your long runs too fast. So again, going back to parts 1 and 2 that we talked about that carry over to this. However, fueling is a big part of this as well. And a big reason I see that people just feel very lethargic and fatigued week after week as, they're working through their marathon training. And that's not normal. So if you're having trouble like getting through the rest of your day post long run, that isn't normal. Yes, you'll probably be tired. Yes, you'll probably close your eyes and fall asleep as soon as you hit the pillow that night, but you should still be able to go about your day as a normal human being after running a long run or a speed session. So here's the nitty gritty. As an endurance runner, you cannot be afraid of carbs. Your body needs sugar as fuel in order to do your best. And though this can absolutely come from things like Pop-Tarts or graham crackers, you can definitely go to whole food sources such as sweet potatoes or honey, something like that instead. It doesn't really matter the source of where they're coming from, so much as that you are getting the carbs that you need to fuel the run properly, as well as make you feel great in the process. What works for one person is not going to work for another person. So it's probably going to take a lot of trial and error to figure out what works for your body and what feels good in your body to eat before and during. So guys, I am going to be next making a video about what that proper fueling looks like for the different runs that you're going to be doing. So make sure that you guys subscribe so that you can get that video when it's ready. Otherwise, it will be linked up here. And lastly, guys, I want to say that fueling is a very big part of not getting injured in your training as well. And when you are training for an endurance event and getting that really high mileage, injury is something that is a risk factor if you're not approaching training in the proper way. So I would recommend checking out another video that I have about ways that you can make sure that you're preventing running injuries. So fueling is one of them that I actually don't talk about in the video. There are 6 others, so definitely make sure you check that out. With these tips, you guys will have an awesome training cycle and a next race.